live event, and here's what I call it. We shouldn't call death death. We should call it what's next. And that's based on my own experience on November 18th, 2002, while I was in intensive care at the Waltham Hospital, Waltham, Massachusetts. Now, what I'm upset about is that nobody told me to avoid the tuna salad from the cafeteria. No, I actually had a serious health challenge 5 days earlier. I was doing a seminar, and 1 second I was fine, the next second I needed an ambulance. And 5 days later, flatlined from another major event. So I had acute necrotizing pancreatitis. My pancreas shut down on the 13th of November. I have a blockage. So 19 years later, I still have a blockage in my pancreas, and I have less than 10% of it remaining. And then on the fifth day, November 18th, I had an anterior myocardial infarction. And I was 1 second in intensive care with two friends, in fact, visiting me at the end of my bed, and the next second, one with everything and nothing. So before I go on, let me just say that I don't make light of death. I have three brothers and a sister who passed before me, and of course, my mother and father. One brother passed from suicide. So certainly there have been tragic events in my life. Friends have passed away, some suddenly and unexpectedly, and some after long illnesses. And what I can tell you is that what I've learned is we don't have to grieve. We can suffer the loss, but wondering where they are, they're fine. They actually went from this to that, like I did on November 18th. And the Waltham Hospital didn't bring me back to life. They brought life back to me. And I think that, we're so afraid of dying that we don't truly live. And that was partly where I was, but more so, I was 50 on that day and was more involved in living from the outside in. So life, it was more important that I was reacting to events and living from the outside in a Western society is based on money and material things we acquire like homes and job titles and responsibilities, and looking at where I was compared to others. And it was all, I'm looking for my acorn. It was all small-minded thinking. And that small-minded, judgmental thinking, fascinating. When I left my body, none of that small-minded thinking was with me on the other side. And the other side, people ask me to describe it. I was one with everything and nothing. It was just a knowing. And there was only the now. There was only this moment. And then there was a life review. So it was like a scene and a scene and a scene. It was really literally like a play occurring before me in my consciousness, right? I was in pure consciousness. When people ask me to describe where I was, I think of what Deepak Chopra said. We come from pure consciousness and we return to it. And so here's why I think it's important to think about really living, because I was 50 and never had any symptoms. And that day, on November 13th, when I needed an ambulance, I had no idea that was going to come that day. And fortunately, I got a second chance, which I guess it's my purpose now. And that's really been what I've been doing, is sharing my experience so that others can live fully, make the choice. And it's up to you. Never follow anyone or anything or me blindly. To prove it to yourself that you can be in the moment and enjoy life, whatever comes, because the small-minded thinker will try to tell you how wrong everyone is, how wrong things are, try to remind you how much you could have done better, could be doing better, remind you of every mistake you've made. And fortunately, none of that goes with us. We go from this to pure, infinite love, grace, mercy, forgiveness. I mean, it's amazing, and words do not describe it. I can tell you that it's way beyond. When I got back in my body, it was way beyond my little acorn brain. I was blown away by it. And so then there was the knowing, no body, just pure consciousness, one with everything and nothing. And then there was a life review, and only the good I had done, only the lives I had touched was mentioned. Think about it. Think about how you feel when you do good. And that's why I think it's important for us to truly live and to do good, to let yourself go when it comes to thinking about giving someone a few bucks on the street, or helping someone out, or serving food, or buying food for others, or maybe it's shoveling your neighbor's walk. Whatever it is, do good and think about how you feel when you do good. And that's really why we're here, is to overcome all the judgments, all the small-minded thinking that tries to enroll you in, don't do that, don't give that guy money, or you don't have time to help that person with their car. Certainly there are safety reasons for not doing some things, and if you feel afraid, then pay attention to that. But again, challenge your own small-minded thinking and work to expand into limitless thinking, modeling that which we live in, a universe. A universe. And while on the other side, I can tell you there was no division. There were no sexes, no nationalities, no races. Everything was one. Certainly no political parties, and the craziness that everyone pointing fingers at each other today. Certainly our leaders are not modeling good behavior, and then they're expecting the citizens to model good behavior. And it's gone on for years. It's not the last 4 or 5 years. It's 10, 15, 20 years. Our leaders don't accomplish anything. So it's time to rethink things. We're in a monologue and not a dialogue. And when you think of the infinite, small-minded, if it sounds small-minded, it's not what we come from. And that's why I know now it's my job to overcome small-minded thinking. And my journey is my business, and everyone else's journey is none of my business. Who cares what choices everyone else makes in their life? If they're loving others, does it matter who they love? If they're helping others, does it matter who they help? But when we sink into pointing fingers in a monologue, making others wrong, painting whole segments of society with generalizations or a broad brush, or railing on social media about people who think differently than you do, that's what life is. We're supposed to learn how to get over all that small-minded thinking. And I can tell you there was only the now, as I mentioned earlier. And so living in the now, I think, is important because it helps us to embrace whatever shows up, and especially when the small-minded thinker that resides in our amygdala, that's been trained by the caveman days, flight or fight, fear. We don't need that thinking today. And so we've evolved because we're gradually overcoming it, and yet it still exists on many levels. And it's self-limiting thinking. And what I can tell you is that we shouldn't fear death, but embrace the moment, because that's all there was on the other side. There was no past or no future. There was only the now and the now and the now. Pure consciousness. I was one with everything and nothing, and it was just a knowing. And then the life review and all the lives I had touched, everyone I had helped, family, friends, strangers, everything good that I did. And you think about the human small-minded thinker, not only does it want people to pay for what they do here, right? In a cause and effect world, you make a mistake or you do something that's very negative, you're going to pay. There's going to be a consequence. Even if you never get caught, you're going to live with it. But it's humans to think, well, not only will they pay here, they'll burn in hell forever. I can tell you, there was no mention of any of my mistakes or what others call sins. I was blown away by that, which empowered me that since I got a second chance at life, to just do good and not worry about what others think and to help as many people as I can. And I still make sure I take good care of myself so I can take better care of others. And that's what's occurred. I have plenty to spare and share. And I've been helping many others, not questioning like I did many years ago. And I was 50 when that event occurred. I would reach into my pocket and give people money. And oftentimes others would be with me and say, you're not going to give that person money, or you're not going to buy them a sandwich, or you're not going to help that person, are you? And many times I overcame it and many times I did not. And now what I think is, thank you, universe. Thank you, God. Thank you, the creation, for letting me serve you. Because I know, since there was only the now, that everything I was searching for is in the moment. God, the creation, the goddess, the Brahma, the Buddha, the Christ, the Muhammad, the Abraham, whatever you call it, is never absent from this existence. Think about that. We go searching for it, but our acorn brain says it couldn't be in the now. That person bothers me. The traffic upsets me. What's divine about that, Steve? It's for you to learn and grow. And the people that bug you and the events that bother you the most are the greatest gifts. But don't take my word for it. Begin to prove it to yourself. Overcome all those small-minded, what I call reacting. Reacting, I hyphenate it because it's something previously learned. And I challenge you to overcome your own small-minded thinking and begin to expand into limitless thinking, modeling what created us. We live in a miracle. Just picture this. This is the globe painted on a marble. This is what we are, floating around an exposed nuclear fusion plant that we call a sun to make it comfortable. Then there's a rock floating around us that affects our tides. If that's not a miracle, right? Here we are in a void on a garden planet, in a vacuum, in something that even physicists still, as close as they think they are to figuring things out, they aren't. Many things still astound them and it will continue to, because we cannot even begin to comprehend it. We can begin to model it. And you have to prove it to yourself, challenge yourself to overcome it, begin to expand that small-minded thinker and see what it does for your life. When you begin to look at all events as part of the divine, not searching for things to do to become one with the divine. And, certainly I'm not making any traditions wrong. Anything that brings you back to gratitude for living and closer to the idea of a spiritual existence and becoming one with what Ernest Holmes called the all in all. He used to say that God is the all in everyone. And he said, I am one with the all in all, and that we all are. Whatever you do as a practice is fine, but start to think about every moment as being divine, because guess what? If the life force took its attention off of this miracle we live in, it would all come falling apart, flying apart. What if everything is working together for good, as many of the prophets have said? That means all the things, even the things that we want to rail against and are angry about, it's there for good, to create something new. Even in today's events, perhaps all the railing against one another, and the monologue will finally lead to dialogue when people say enough. Even our news media has now stopped reporting news based on truth. It's news based on a narrative. And they go searching for people to support their narrative. And we can see many, many evidences, incidences where that's true, where people have just decided to report a narrative that fits what they're angry about, and they want to point it out to everybody and change all our minds. It's funny because it's truly none of their business. They could report the news and leave it at that. I don't watch it much anymore because it's so much of it is ridiculous that we don't even know where the truth is. Where the truth is, though, is beginning to embrace the moment. And I challenge you to look at every moment and every person as a gift from the divine, from God, the goddess, whatever you call it. It had no name. That was the other thing that was fascinating. It was as if Lao Tzu was in my head from 600 AD or BC, I believe. 600 BC, when Lao Tzu was teaching people about the life force, as he called it, and people asked him, "What do you call this life force?" And he said, generally, I paraphrase, "You cannot name that which has no name." That's where I was. So we should be doing what some cultures do. They cry at birth, knowing what we know about life. They cry when a baby's born, saying, "Oh, wow, what they're gonna experience. Oh," and at death they celebrate. They're back. They're back home. Now, I suspect too that we do come back. That if we don't learn in this life, we'll come back again and again until we learn it, until we get that God is in the now, the divine is in the now. And when we get over the idea that we die and we call it death, it sounds so final that there's a what's next. And it's fascinating. You can look at people who I suspect did overcome great things and came here only to contribute. Look at Mother Teresa, look at Gandhi, look at Martin Luther King, and many others who have done great things, not just living for themselves, but living for a bigger purpose. And so ponder it. Think about it. Think about how you feel when you do good. Think about how much of your small-minded thinker is running you. Are you going to let it run you, or are you going to run it? You can run that small-minded thinker, but you have to prove that to yourself. And many people in today's society believe they're small-minded thinker, which leads them to do and say many outrageous and crazy things. Even our leaders, even our political leaders. Now, perhaps the only way to have a new dialogue and get away from the monologue is to go through all these experiences, because I do think it's all in order. There was not a moment where the divine wasn't present with me. And at my final moment, I was asked a question: stay or go? And my consciousness surrendered to the moment. And this is the other thing that I learned, that I took with me when I was back in intensive care. My consciousness surrendered like at no other time while I was in my body, with "thy will be done." And I was right back in intensive care, back in this human experience, and back with all the small-minded thoughts like, how are you going to pay the rent? I was in the hospital 100 days, 60 days straight, and 40 in and out of the hospital of the next 60, and 6 months out of work. But I can tell you, $24,000 came in the mail. I went in November 13th, around December 22nd, 23rd, might have been the 24th. I'm not sure if it correlates to Christmas Eve, but money started coming in the mail from people who heard what I was going through. I mean, what a miracle. While I was in the hospital, I got 5 job offers. Never filled out one application. Just people phoning, saying, "Hey, Steve, we heard about you. We'd love come work for us after you get out." Others didn't know. One guy called and said, "Hey, Steve, what are you up to?" I said, "I'm in the hospital." He said, "Well, I want you to take a position I have for a guy that's retiring." I said, "Well," his name was Mike. I said, "Mike, I don't know when I'm going to get out of here." He said, "That's okay. I'll wait." Just think of the miracles. And gratitude is something that I had been studying. And I can tell you, I was grateful getting in the ambulance, even before, when I had to leave the seminar by saying, "Hey, I got to go." And I went next door to my partner's office and said, "I need an ambulance." I had a feeling of gratitude wave over me. And now I had been studying the power of gratitude, and I had been writing gratitudes and expressing gratitudes daily and thinking about things I was grateful for, but I didn't get the feeling of gratitude fully until I was getting in the ambulance. It was a sense that this was going to be a miracle, a life-changing event like a forest fire or a flood. New growth occurs after both of those events, and new growth occurred for me after this major event. And like I said, I survived acute necrotizing pancreatitis and an anterior myocardial infarction 5 days later. And today I have no symptoms. Truly a walking miracle. And I think of the events on November 18th, 2002, like it was 5 minutes ago. I have that gift of reminding me to just be in the now and to embrace it all. Like Eckhart Tolle says, he says, when you fight life, life fights you. And that's where I was on November 13th. He also says, and I chuckle, some people think reality is nuts. And then he advises, when you feel yourself fighting life, breathe, surrender to the moment, and just say, oh, this must be the plan. But again, don't take my word for it. You have to prove it to yourself. Begin looking at each moment that comes as part of the gift of life, the miracle of life, that life itself is feedback when you can look at it that way. If you sink into victim consciousness and start telling people your story of woe and start saying things like, whoa, you want to hear what happened to me this week? What you do is find others who'll say, yeah, well, that happened to you. Well, listen to what happened to me. You'll find people that will provide evidence that what you're gathering is true, that you're a victim. But you can prove to yourself you're also a master of circumstance. And the acorn brain will have you going back and forth between being a victim and being a master of circumstance. But work on developing that level of thinking above your thinking, as Dr. Srikumar Rao calls it. Catch those thoughts that hook you into being less than anyone, more than anyone. None of it is true. We're all the same when we leave here. No one leaves here a king or a pauper. We leave here the same. So if you're running around trying to prove how much better you are than anybody, spending your energy trying to gather more assets, titles, just contribute with your purpose and not worry about what comes. You want to write a book? Write a book. Don't worry about how much income comes from it. You can go on Amazon today, Amazon Direct Publishing, Kindle Direct Publishing, and they'll publish your book for no cost. And you'll have left it for the universe. Pay attention to the events that happen to you, like what occurred to me. In the events that challenge you greatly is your greatest gift. At least it was for me. So begin to look at life differently, as every moment being blessed and divine and something to be grateful for, and see what occurs. That the cast of characters you have around you is a reflection of your thinking. If you have a lot of people that challenge you, that expand your thinking, that perhaps they bug you and cause you to grow because they're willing to risk your wrath, that's great. They're helping you stretch. If you have a lot of people that are sharing your victim consciousness, perhaps it's time to change. Maybe that's what they're there. Their gift is to show you that you're not stretching enough, that you're not challenging yourself. sunk into victim consciousness. The other thing is perhaps your journey is perfect, that you have it for a reason. There's many, many people that will try to tell you that certain segments of our population are victims. We should feel sorry for their journey. Their journey is a gift, perhaps to wake them up to stretch and grow. I don't have the answers for that, but knowing that we do live in a miracle, there is a greater consciousness, I can tell you that created this. I was there, that perhaps it's way above our hubris and our ego that thinks we know better than anyone or know better than others, or that we have to excuse some from their journey. Why take away their possible accomplishment by rising above whatever they've been given, by moving through it? Just something to think about. Everyone else's journey is none of your business, or at least it's none of mine. That's what I've proven to myself. And my job is to leave everything and everyone a little better than I find them, because somehow the good I had done up until I was 50 was etched onto the fabric of time. And that excites me and encourages me today to continue to do good and to leave this message for people to get it or not. I don't care whether you believe it or not. I just care that you challenge yourself to prove it to yourself, because it'll make a difference. It'll make a difference. And imagine using your life purpose to leave everything and everyone a little better than we find them. See what that does for your own life. Any questions? Steve at Steve Lentini. Steve at stevelentini.com. That's Steve at Steve, L as in Linda, E-N as in Nancy, T as in Tom, I-N-I.com. Stretch yourself. Do good. Live in the moment. Embrace life as feedback.